Seconded by Courtney. All in favor? That's also carried. So we're really excited to have Emily Hollington, Director of Social Services, and Julie Stewart, County Planner, with us from Lanark County today. And they're going to discuss, bring a presentation on the county's recent municipal tools to support affordable housing development. And this came to Community Services Committee, I believe it was last month, April 6th, I think it was. And so we're excited to have you here today. This committee is a very passionate group of people who are very dedicated to doing what we can to increase the supply of affordable and NRGI housing in our community, as well as housing overall. So Emily, I guess the floor is yours. We look forward to your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Panko, and thank you for having us here today. I'm just going to share my screen. Sorry, I'm having computer issues now.
So we can't see the presentation. It is there.
Yeah, I just can't. Sorry. There we go. Okay, so you can see it okay now.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, it was just my issue. So Julie and I are excited to be here today to share a summary of our report. I know delegation's supposed to be 10 minutes. Our slide is quite long, but we are going to try and go through it quickly. But we thought it was important to kind of give you that full summary, very similar to what County Council received. So we'll go through it.
I would say we've got 2 hours blocked off for this, so we're not sure how much time you have, but take the time you need to go through it in the most, I guess, the best manner.
Okay, so Julie and I maybe don't have 2 hours, but we'll try for sure to be thorough with you. And the plan is, the full study is available on the county website, and so it's there. If anyone has issues accessing it, you can just email us and we can get you a copy. So it was actually in the fall of last year where we partnered with SHS Consulting. So this is the project team. SHS Consulting specializes in housing and affordable housing strategic planning. And they hired WSIP, who is a planning group, a municipal planning group. They focus on that to support them in the process. And then Julie and I partnered. It's really the first formal partnership between the Social Services Department at the county and the county planning department on this type of project. So we are pretty excited about it. So a little bit of background to how we got here. So Lanark County has a 10-year housing and homelessness plan. That housing and homelessness plan focuses on the entire housing continuum. So looks at everything from homelessness and shelters to supportive housing to rent geared to income housing, all the way up to regular market housing. So that is kind of the broad overarching document. And this study that we did and that we're going to speak to today only focuses on one part of that overarching plan. So it looks at category 2 of the plan and category 5. So category 2 is to plan for a diverse range of housing choices. And category 5 is educate the community on local housing needs and offer incentives to build affordable housing. So some things we looked at is what type of housing will be needed in our communities over the next 10 years? How do we keep young people in our community? How can we help low and middle income individuals and families transition from rental to home ownership? What incentives will encourage organizations and the private market to build more rental units or more affordable housing and home ownership? So those are the kind of questions we were looking to answer with this study. So as I mentioned, this is the wheelhouse, or also which contains elements of the housing continuum. And while our 10-year plan focuses on all aspects, this study really just focuses on that market, ownership, and rental housing. So how is it that we can get more units in there, and let's say affordable market rentals or affordable home ownership rentals? Also understanding that that doesn't address the needs and everything, but the county has other initiatives ongoing to support lower income households with things like rent geared to income and portable housing benefits. So a little bit of background. So the purpose of the study was really to build on that 10-year housing and homelessness plan, not to replace it. We wanted to analyze housing affordability needs and identify opportunities and barriers to meet those needs. Provide a broad overview of key characteristics and trends that are impacting current and future affordability for people that live in Lanark County, and create a toolkit of municipal planning tools that help address housing needs and demands. I should also mention that we use Lanark County as the term in here, but the study does cover the municipalities in Lanark County plus the town of Smith Falls, because the county is the service system manager for the town. So it does include Smith Falls. So as I mentioned, this started in September of last year, where we partnered with SHS and WSIP, started collecting some data. We conducted stakeholder engagement sessions, developed some draft housing targets, had public engagements in January of 2022, and then the final report was shared with Community Services Committee and adopted by County Council this spring. So we use some of the following data sources have been included in this study, including Statistics Canada community and census profiles from 2006 and 2016, recognizing that that data is old, but it was the newest data that we have. And when council approved the study, there was a staff direction to look at updating the study with the 2021 census data, which is not released until I believe September of this year. So we are looking into updating the data to have more recent data. So that's great news. Canada Mortgage and Housing data, which is from 2021, the majority of it, some point in time scans of rental prices. So those are up to date to reflect any increases that have happened over COVID. Some data from Lanark County, as well as local municipal plans and documents from each of the lower tier municipalities and the town of Smith Falls. So Julie is going to speak to us about defining affordable housing, which is one of the initial things that we had the consultant look at.
Okay, thanks, Emily. So the provincial policy statement is what guides land use planning in the province of Ontario. So it does define affordable housing, and it's divided into ownership housing and rental housing. So the consultants through the process looked at what is affordable in Lanark County. And so that shows on this slide kind of the percentage, which is 10% less than the market rate, which falls under the PPS definition. So part of this, and we'll speak later to like action items. One of the action items is to provide a definition in the Lanark County official plan, and to recommend, which most municipalities are looking at their official plans to in terms of defining. So, and that definition could differ in the lower tier municipal official plans, as long as it's consistent with the PPS and the county OP, which is a bit different for Smith Falls because you're your own entity in terms of planning, but that's where the county is at in terms of the definition.
Okay, so just a little bit about the community engagement we did as part of this study. So we did a resident survey, which was done in September, October of last year. We had just over 500 responses, so really good response rate. We held 4 stakeholder sessions in October of 2021, and we had representatives from local municipal staff, I do believe Carl was there, community agencies, nonprofit housing developers, and quite a great uptake from private developers as well. We also had 3 public engagement sessions that were held in January with 94 participants from the general public attending. So what we heard from those engagement sessions, there's a need and interest for local definitions of affordable housing across the different municipalities in Lanark County. Some policies and provisions in current municipal official plans and zoning bylaws present barriers to the development of more diverse housing supply. There's a demand for affordable housing, which I think you all know, including rental and supportive options across the county. There's a desire for different development standards for affordable units or alternative housing forms. Of course, in rural communities, not really specific to Smith Falls, but there are servicing constraints in rural villages and hamlets that prevent challenges for developing more diverse supply. And of course, the pandemic is being felt across all communities in Lanark County when it comes to housing. So some key housing gaps. The first gap that was identified is there's a need for more diverse housing supply in the county, including housing options for the aging population and smaller households. So one thing we know is that small households are increasing and large households are decreasing. So the housing stock that we have might not be suitable, or, definitely leads to affordability issues for the households that currently live in Lanark County. It also could identify that there's underutilized space in some households. The second gap that was determined is there's a need for rental housing options in a range of dwelling types and affordability levels. So essentially, there just is not enough rental stock. There has been an increase in renter households from 2006 to 2016, and I would imagine when we look at the new data that will have increased even more. And that increase was just over 17%. And from the resident survey, 94% of respondents indicated that they believe there's not sufficient rental housing stock in their community. And then the last table there looks at household spending 30% or more on household income on shelter costs. So that's an affordability level that's looked at for rent geared to income housing. So it does show that renter households are struggling more than owner households. So the third gap was an adequate supply of affordable housing supports economic growth and community well-being. And so we asked in the survey if you could change or improve anything related to housing in Lanark County, what would it be? And really the strong answer was availability of housing options or affordable housing options to low and middle income households. One thing we do find is that people are struggling to move along the housing continuum, that households before that were probably renting, let's say younger people, they get better jobs before they would be able to purchase a house, move along the continuum, and then other households will be able to move into that rental, but we're not seeing that happen anymore. The continuum's been very stagnant just because of the high costs of housing at this time. So that in itself is creating a lot of issues in our communities. Okay, and Julie is going to speak to us about the recommendations.
Sure. So there were some recommended housing actions for Lanark County. And again, as Emily said, this is inclusive of Smith Falls. So there was kind of 4 different categories of these action items: policy and regulations, funding actions, partnership actions, and awareness and advocacy actions. So a total of 44 actions. So housing goals. So goal number 1, to encourage a broad range of housing options which meet the needs of current and future Lanark County residents. So this has it lists in the tables like total of 32 actions and what these fall under. And you'll see there's this little tables on each goal. Some of them cross over. So some of the goals or some of the actions are relevant to more than one goal. Next slide. Goal 2, to increase the supply of market rate and affordable rental housing across all communities in Lanark County. Goal 3, to support economic growth and community well-being through an adequate supply of housing, which is affordable to households with moderate incomes. So some of these recommended actions in terms of policy and regulations. So as we spoke to, adopt a definition for affordable housing based on the PPS. Adopt and implement annual housing targets for a diverse housing supply, including both rental housing and affordable housing. Develop alternative development and design standards for affordable and supportive housing. Just in terms of maybe some just different design standards still under compliance with the building code, but that permit a little bit of flexibility for the industry to develop. Implement a rental retention policy. Provide appropriate surplus land buildings for affordable and/or supportive housing at below market value. Permit 2 additional residential units on a property, which is consistent with provincial legislation. And some of the lower tier municipalities have already put that into place. Develop policies that allow for redevelopment, infill, and conversion of non-residential to residential uses in downtowns and other appropriate areas. So that policy is something that would be applicable to Smith Falls because you are a serviced municipality and you do have a downtown. So there may be that opportunity within existing buildings. Allow for opportunities to increase maximum height and density requirements in downtowns and other appropriate areas, what used to be termed as like bonusing provisions in the zoning bylaws. Encourage and support the development of accessible housing. Adopt a definition of shared housing, which is shared housing, co-housing, where you have different age groups or whatever living together, and add a policy to encourage and support the development of shared housing in all communities. Adopt policies that support energy efficiency and environmental sustainability in housing design and development. So now on to some of the funding recommended actions. To establish an affordable housing fund to finance incentives and other initiatives related to affordable housing. Develop a municipal housing facilities bylaw to facilitate the provision of incentives for affordable housing. Provide incentives to encourage the development of affordable and supportive housing. So when I'm speaking these things, they're like not just specific to Lanark County or to one specific municipality, but that the county and local municipalities, these are optional action items or action items that are there for municipalities to buy into, I guess, and with the help of the county as well. Some of them might be initiatives of the county, could be vice versa. Develop a brownfield revitalization program, exempt additional residential units from local development charges, study the feasibility of providing grants to homeowners who rent out vacant homes. Recommended actions for partnerships. So to facilitate partnerships to renovate, redevelop, or convert vacant or underutilized land or buildings to increase the supply of affordable and supportive housing. This could be partnerships with community associations, levels of government, private developers, to facilitate that partnership and kind of open those doors up to lots of opportunities for partnerships. Consider developing a countywide rental housing database. Encourage community agencies to develop a home sharing pilot program among seniors and persons with low and moderate incomes who are looking for affordable rental housing. And awareness and advocacy actions. So to really try and promote a Yes in My Backyard team to lead awareness and advocacy initiatives to educate people. Develop and share an annual housing report card to report on progress toward the housing targets. Advocate to the provincial and federal government for increased funding for affordable housing. Host events to share knowledge and experience and increase awareness of the need for a diverse housing supply, including affordable and supportive housing. And these actions aren't like separate actions. Like you can see how some of these awareness actions then tie into partnership actions. So it's collaborative actions, I guess. and then how this would work on this chart. So privately owned land, and pair that with flexible policies allowing increased densities and a more diverse housing stock, along with alternative development standards, plus incentives from the county or other levels of government, CMHC or the province or the municipality, and then your private developer. And then in the end, you have a mixed affordable market rental housing in a mid-rise building as an example of how it could work. I think Emily, Emily, do you want me to go through the next steps? Sorry, I can't. So next steps. So as Mayor Pankow initiated this or commented, this has been through County Economic Development or County Community Services Committee and County Council. But any recommendations will be brought back to Council for consideration. For example, suggested official plan policies. So we get to developing the county official plan update. We would bring that recommended definition to County Council. So there still is that next step of needs council approval. So SHS, the consulting firm, to present the report to the general public, which that's tomorrow. This morning, there was a presentation to municipalities, planners and CEOs, and some councillors joined as well. And tomorrow is to the public staff. So Emily and I will return to council with a report on priority focus areas. And then council was also interested in the data because of the census data was based on the 2016 information. So county council was interested in updates to that based on the 2021 Statistics Canada. So that may be coming in September. So I think that's our slides and our presentation.
Okay, well, thanks, Emily and Julie. And I'm sure we have some questions from the group. But before that, I just want to, and the group may be aware, but I wanted to just remind everyone of a recent decision at the county to ensure that the Caribridge Community Support Project at 44 Chambers could move ahead with all rent geared to income units. So decision, I think in November or December of last year, the county had committed to funding all 28 units as an RGI using 100% of market rent as a measure to determine the supplement that Caribridge could be entitled to for these units. And that was when Caribridge was applying for funding under the Rapid Housing Initiative. They weren't successful under that program. And they had responded to an RFP issued by the county under Emily's leadership. And in the end, the recommendation from the staff that was endorsed by Community Services Committee and County Council was to provide just under $3.7 million in capital funding to Caribridge for the project, as well as increasing the rent supplement to 130% of average, the calculation to be based on 130% of current market rent, recognizing how challenging it is for even not-for-profit to construct a new project and to ensure that it can be at least sustaining with rent geared to income revenue streams. So I want to thank Emily and her team and County Council for being very supportive of that. We know that the project will be starting later this year, and there'll be 28 new family units, which will have a great new place to live in a very central location at rent geared to income, meaning they'll be paying 30% of their gross earnings in rent. So that's a significant development. And so we're grateful to Caribridge, but also Emily for your support and leadership through this. So I'll open the floor up to questions. I'm sure Julie and Emily are prepared to handle some questions. I'm sure there are some. Okay, Vicky, you're usually good to go first, Vicky.
No, I know. Just curious. It's great what's going on with Caribridge. I'm really happy about that. Just curious, how many years has council committed to funding this? Is it indefinite or is there a time frame?
Emily?
Yeah, it's 40 years. Which then would allow CareBridge to break away from us, but we've had other like 50-year projects with them that started many years ago, and they are still in the business. So,
Ellie?
Yeah, I was just wondering, maybe I missed it, but I think I said, if I was reading it correctly, about 47% of renters are living in non-affordable housing. And we were talking about how there was a bit of an issue in the struggle kind of moving along that continuum. Did any of the goals kind of, or recommendations going forward, look into how we can help move individuals kind of out of that, not just out of unaffordable rentals, but also moving them along that continuum?
Go ahead, Emily.
yeah, so all the goals and the actions are about moving people along that continuum. So looking at like what are things that, what are municipal planning tools that could be implemented to encourage developers to build less expensive home ownership, and that would help people move along the continuum. Or how can we encourage developers to build more rental stock and have it at less expensive rates? So what are some things that lower tier municipalities or the town of Smith Falls or the county could implement that would make it attractive to them to build here, and to build at less expensive costs so that they could offer a more affordable rate. So all of the goals kind of look at things like that. And I should say a lot of the recommendations might not fit every municipality because, as Julie mentioned, like they're not serviced, but it's more of a toolkit so that municipalities can take these and apply what makes sense in their communities. But, yeah.
And across the county, talking about Jelly, it's like, of course, it is the urban municipalities, Smith Falls, Perth, Crown Place, and Mississippi Mills to Almont that are feeling most of the pressure and have most of the rental housing stock. So it is more relevant for us. But go ahead, Ellie.
Yeah, and then I guess just kind of adding on to that, next question would be, I think it's really great to incentivize, builders and developers. There's lots of building happening in Smith Falls specifically right now. You can't go anywhere without seeing a new build. Are there any kind of supports or recommendations or kind of strategies, tools, whichever, to specifically help, like targeting the tenant as opposed to targeting just the developers? I'm thinking like educational, like, looking at how to apply for mortgages, any kind of supports directed at the tenants.
It's a good question. So the plan doesn't really look at supports for people. That is more in our 10-year plan. This really focuses on stock, on increasing stock. I could say there probably is some though, because like the YIMBY instead of a NIMBYism, like the opposite of yes in my backyard, is something that we're going to look at, and that would maybe hopefully help support tenants. But this plan really doesn't look at supports. That's the 10-year plan. It's definitely much more focused on stock.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just thinking, even if we have, quote unquote, affordable stock being built by developers, it's, they're not going to build, just the prices of things have gone up, right? So you're not going to be able to build a house for $300,000 anymore, which is just, out of options for individuals. So I guess I'm wondering, not so much are we offering supports to individuals, but are there any kind of tools, not, I guess, one-on-one supports, but looking at how, I don't want to say savings because it's impossible to save with the prices of, groceries and gas and everything. But how they can perhaps, support themselves, I guess, ways in which they, tenants can learn to support themselves into, options of mortgages and whatnot.
Right. So yeah, this plan does not look at anything for supports for people. That's the 10-year plan. This is really about increasing stock. It's about increasing affordable housing stock in rentals, but not about supports for people.
Yeah.
That is
And
the
can you
ticket.
speak to a moment about the home ownership plan available through the county? Because that probably would fit in with what Ellie is.
Yeah, so we do have, like, outside of this study, a number of programs that support people, and one is the home ownership, where we meet with people looking to purchase houses, and we do budgets with them to make sure that, you know, this is a feasible decision. And it provides 5% of the purchase price of the home to be used towards a down payment. And I would say the last couple of years, we've seen that been a bit of a struggle, but it has definitely this year been quite popular. We've had a little influx this spring, which is good. So we work with families on how to purchase a home and who to connect to and help them with that purchase price, that down payment, which is very hard to save when you're renting. So we do have other programs kind of outside of this for sure.
Joanne, did you have your hand up? Yeah. Oh, or was that? No
I was
problem.
just wondering, like, the plan has, like, it looks really nice. Has any developers contacted you guys, like, to see how, like, I know Smith Falls has some buildings going up, and but I don't think that they're going to be geared to income other than the one on Chamber Street. Is that am I wrong in that?
No, I don't think you're wrong. I will say I was so incredibly impressed with the developers. We had 2 meetings in the early days of doing this plan, and they were my favorite meetings of all of this because they were very keen in looking at how to do this. But of course, kind of like Ellie mentioned, like, building housing is expensive and they are for-profit businesses, so we must be mindful of that. But they are very keen to look at partnerships with the municipalities and with the county to build affordable housing. It might not be rent geared to income because all rent geared to income in Lanark County is subsidized by Lanark County. It's not a business model for a for-profit developer, but it would be affordable housing, so below market rent. And they are very keen. And it's going to take, it's not just one incentive to, this is what a message they shared. It can't just be one incentive. It has to be a combination of things, kind of like we mentioned in that last slide. So a donation of land, a waiver of development charges, a grant from Lanark County, expedited planning process. So a combination of all those things that maybe in their building of 20 units, maybe 15 would be market, but perhaps with those other incentives, they could offer a portion of them to be affordable. But they were incredibly, really on board for sure. It was impressive.
Yeah, I think I had mentioned that too when I first started, that it would be nice to see so many units that are market, but then so many units that are set aside for geared to income. And I think, yeah, because we can't all go for market, because then that just puts us all out. And a lot of people can't afford to be in market.
But to your point, Joanne, that's, I guess, when you look at the Carebridge development, they would not be able to provide RGI units without the capital funding from the county, as well as that monthly supplement for the rent. So what it's costing, even in a situation like this, $300,000 per apartment, $300,000 per apartment. The amount of rent you need to charge just to cover your carrying costs is far above what is affordable for a lot of people. So it's a challenging environment, and we've got not-for-profits, the county, and for-profit developers are really the only options we have. And so this is a great example that's going to make a difference. But for a for-profit developer, I think, Emily, your comments are so relevant and the work we've been doing with this committee over the last year and the task force before that was to try to help provide some of those incentives and reductions in fees that would motivate a for-profit developer to try and include some affordable units within a development. We've had, I think it's 5 to 7, I guess, between 2 developments, one on Brockville Street and one on Beckwith North, where the developer did agree to provide some units at reduction to rent, and there's also a possibility over on William and Maple as well. So it's a challenge, but I guess I'll come back to my question anyway. I'll go to Vicky first and then Sam.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of like putting more money in developers' pockets, which, like, don't get me wrong, as a renter, I desperately need developers to build, apparently, because the county will not save us. And I'm just kind of feeling perplexed because, like, I'm trying to get along the housing continuum, of course. My partner's gotten a better job. We've started our own business. We've done everything right, but we're still not able to, save. And we're in an affordable unit that is less than what market rent is, but at the same time, not 30% of our income. And I'm just wondering, like, what ensures the affordability over a period of time when these developers build? Like, is there any, what's the word? Like, is there going to be a contract of how long these need to be, quote, affordable? Is there going to be like a certain amount that needs to be affordable? Like, what ensures that we're going to be helped? Because at this point, I'm just hearing developers are going to get all the money when renters desperately need it.
Emily?
Yeah. So it is valid point. So the goal is not to give more money to developers, but it's to find ways to make it less expensive for them to develop. And in turn, they're held to some rules with us. So, for instance, Northumberland County has an interesting program. If you look in the back of the study when you have a chance after, there's quite a few examples of different communities and things that they've implemented. So I don't know if it's in there, but Northumberland has a housing affordability fund, and they give grants out to developers, and they'll do things in that grant like waive development charges. But with that, they sign a contract. There's a possibility of even registering a grant. Any grant we do is registered on title of the home or the building. So if they just break anything, like they sell the unit for more than what they're allowed to sell it for, or they rent it for more than they're allowed to rent it for, like above the affordability levels, they're required to pay those funds back. So our relationship with Caribridge will be the same. I mean, I know that Caribridge is going to be a great partner, but let's say they decided to rent a unit for $2,000 a month in breach of that contract. We would terminate the contract and they'd have to pay us back. So there are things that, things you can put in place to holding third parties accountable to keeping the affordability levels.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sam?
I actually just had the same question as Vicky. I was just curious to know what was sort of in place for developers in terms of negotiating incentives and making sure that they held up their end of the bargain. So thank you.
Carl, do you mind speaking for a moment? Because we have a handful of units where developers had agreed to provide some units at below market rent, and the town formed an agreement with them. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. We'd worked on sort of on a case-by-case, site-specific basis, affordability agreements for individual units that they've agreed to create as affordable. And I think in a way, this is definitely the next step in the process. It can lead to us, I think, codifying the process, and as we develop our own community improvement plan that includes reference to and incentives for affordable housing and attainable housing. I think that the sort of the contractual obligation becomes a very important part of that, and that's, we would be looking for our consultants to advise us on that, as well as monitoring it to make sure that it does achieve the effect that we all want it to.
Thank you. Emily, can you speak a little bit to the one, or Julie, one of you, the recommendation to establish affordable housing fund to provide incentives? So, I mean, that's a statement, but you're going to, I guess, we'll go back and develop policy and guidance around that. Can you able to establish further thoughts, or what is being provided elsewhere that could be possible within the county in Smith Falls?
I can start if you want, Julie. like we will have to look at developing a policy around that. So it's hard for me to say what Lanark counties might look like right now, because I really don't know. But I mean, the Northumberland example is one example where it's open to developers all the time. So if you wanted to build just one unit in your home that's affordable, it would be a grant. And depending on the level of affordability is the amount of money that you get and how long your commitment is, like it increases. So there's quite a few examples. Like, I don't recall another one.
I'm just so looking through, Emily, in the book. Yes, there was one like reserve fund in the city of Guelph, community investment funds. So some things that could be tied into, as Carl spoke to, like your CIP plan, I think is something as well, could be a fund. Nova Scotia had a fund that set up for like cooperatives. So I think, yeah, that's what we need to do is, and that's kind of part of a next step, is look at some examples of what would work and what would work for Lanark County, and then, you know, what would work for the local municipalities too.
Thank you. Additional questions? Easy group today so far. Oh, Joanne? I had to say something.
Okay, this is not in reference to the presentation there today, but you said that there are other project or other programs to support. Are those up and running right now? Because I know there was a year end and then we didn't know if they could have the funds. So have the funds been replenished? Like, because I know I put 3 people on the waiting list and I don't think they've received a call yet. And it was for support with rent.
Yeah. So home ownership and Renovate Lanark, which helps with mandatory home repairs, have both been replenished. So those programs are open. And Canada Ontario Housing Benefit, which is a rent support program through the National Housing Strategy, is open with new spaces. But again, we will be going off current wait lists. So rental assistance programs are probably the programs with the biggest demand, and they do have wait lists. I was just to comment too, if you don't mind, page 109 of the study has examples of different housing funds, housing development funds from different areas. I just found it in the study. So based on the last question, there's some examples there we can look at, which will probably be our start for when Julie and I talk about developing that policy. And I hope that answered your question, Joanne. Sorry.
I see, Carl, you have your hand up.
Yes, firstly, thank you, Mr. Chair. Firstly, Julie and Emily, thank you so much for coming and presenting. I enjoyed participating in the stakeholder workshop, and I really like the work you've done, and you've given us a lot of food for thought. I guess the question, and this came up among the planner discussion, and I'm not sure any of us were able to figure out the best answer, but in terms of defining affordability and looking at sort of a county figure based on CMHC, is there a possibility or any ability to develop those figures on a more local basis, knowing that needs and demand are going to be very different in say Lanark Highlands compared to Carleton Place, compared to Smith Falls or Perth or any of the communities? Or are we able to develop more thresholds or figures?
I think, Carl, yeah. So the one slide I talked about, the definition of affordable housing and how the consultant kind of looked at the county as a whole. But I do think like within the report too, there is like specific sections for each municipality that kind of lays out, like let me just flip, like the key housing gaps, and some pretty relevant figures and information. So I think that would help maybe with the base for a localized definition. If I could just find Town of Smith Falls, I could give you an example. So key housing gaps in the Town of Smith Falls. So it includes like the household size and talks about your growth rate and who, like, that you have more seniors, does it have an average rent? So it does talk about like rent, like the average rent as well. So it does give that breakdown for Smith Falls, compares it to other municipalities too, but it gives those specifics. It's kind of that level of information I think you could use to help do a definition that'd be specific to Smith Falls. One part of it anyways, I think.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges is just how the world has changed in the last couple of years,
Mm-hmm.
and what are market rents today, and of course they've increased significantly greater than the incomes have changed since the 2016 census. So I think we look forward to this being updated in the fall with some current data as well.
Mm-hmm.
Sam?
Yeah, I just had a question around the awareness and advocacy recommended actions. So the Convene a Yes in My Backyard team. Just curious, like what you envision that looking like. Is that originating from the county, or is that supporting other organizations and agencies in the county to do that kind of work? I don't know if you can speak to that a little bit.
Good question. I will say, like, some of these recommendations are pretty new to us too, so we don't really have huge plans, but my original thought is that we would partner with a nonprofit on that. Sometimes when the county asks for people to behave a certain way, that is not always accepted as well. Like we did do an ask to private landlords for people to partner with us, and it was not successful. So if we partner with a nonprofit, I do think we could be more successful. And I guess a lot of it would just be around education, around educating people, educating people in the community, like why affordable housing is important and how proper housing for people can save us with other things like incarceration and hospital costs, and that it is a really significant determinant of health, and that investing in this is important for our community as a whole, as well as the individual, but also as a big part of our community as a whole. So our goal would be to try and get that message out there, but hopefully with partnerships from nonprofits, and of course lower tier, like whoever wants to step in, but hopefully a big community initiative across the board, not just Lanark County.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks.
And I think too, just in addition, Emily, like that can be broken into pieces too. I think it was Brant County, maybe. So additional residential units, for example. So having like another unit in your backyard, or converting your part of your garage or something, just like even an education piece on that doesn't really look any different, right? You're providing another unit to people on your current property and it still looks the same. But like, so that's like another, it's education and encouraging people of the benefits of it and to understand what it really looks like what does it really look like? Doesn't look any different.
Well, and Sam's representing Rideau Community Health Services here, so there's probably a great organization who could be potentially helpful down the road with this. Or actually, I look around the screen here, I think you could pick a number of people from here who would be great advocates for supporting that cause.
Yeah.
Vicki?
Yeah, on that note, I was just wondering if we could actually possibly do a public presentation of any kind where we show people what it takes, like what are requirements to going forward on the housing continuum, because I think that's so important. My partner and I ask ourselves every day, like, what are the qualifications for a mortgage? Like, what do we have to do? Do you walk into a bank? Do you make an appointment? We literally don't know. Asked our parents, they said it's been too long. They don't know. So little things like that, little education pieces would be a big help for, I think, a lot of people, especially ones who are looking to get forward in the continuum, if possible. Or maybe there's already something out there. Maybe there's somebody made a YouTube video, who knows? I think that'd be great. And Thank you so much as well for your presentation. It was lovely.
Okay. Any further questions or comments before we let Emily and Julie go back to their other responsibilities they have today?
I think there, I'll had
Lorraine?
a question in the chat just about in terms of getting a copy of the report. So it is on our website, or we could email. Can we email it?
A link.
If you forward to Carl can forward it to the entire group, please.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lorraine?
Yeah, I sit on the accessibility committee, and one of the things that we've been looking at and discussing there is, that seniors, can't afford some of the buildings that they need to go to when they transition out of a home. And sometimes their homes are so big that it's hard for them to even take care of it. And one of the things that we've talked about is that most people will say if we as a community can make our senior buildings and homes accessible for them to stay there, that's the cheapest place for them to be. And it's one of those things that people don't think of at first. So I know that my mother-in-law is in a small bungalow that our family kind of made for her, and she's now 90 and still living at home by herself. We have support people from the health system helping her, but the ramp and the fact that it's flat and all one level, she's legally blind, so she couldn't be there if it wasn't for that. And when we talk about affordability for homes, I think as we age, it becomes another problem too. Making sure that they don't have to go to very expensive healthcare programs or homes that aren't nearly as satisfying as just staying in their own home. So I think that's another factor in helping people with their homes, when they decide what they're going to live in.
Great point. And I got the slide earlier that spoke to the number of large homes in the county that are occupied by, I think, one or two people.
And that ties into the shared housing is one option for those people as well.
And I go back to the study, and I the one number that stands out always is I think it's about 53% of people who rent their homes who are paying more than 30% of their income in rent. And so of course we recognize that even that is probably somewhat dated with the data that populated that. So a deep concern, and I know it's identified in the study. No real actions, I guess, other than trying to create more housing supply and some affordable housing in the long run, which will make a difference. So we recognize it's going to be a collective effort with a lot of policies that are sewn together into an effective policy with incentives to try and encourage developers to, and not-for-profits for that matter, to build more affordable units. And understanding as well that if someone's paying more than 30% and sometimes 40, 50, 60% of their income on housing, in addition to the issues and challenges that creates for that individual, that family, and there's also an economic drain. I mean, they have very little disposable or discretionary income to apply to the local economy. And so the more affordable the housing is, the more they benefit, obviously, and the more the entire community benefits from them able to actually have some discretionary income to live off of. I mean, that's referenced in the report. Okay, any further comments or questions before we wrap up? We let Emily and Julie go, but we don't have much more on our agenda today. Okay. Well, again, Emily and Julie, we really appreciate you coming today. I know this is an extensive report. Thank you for circulating it, or we'll get to everybody here. We have a chance to digest it, and I suppose as well, both of you are available through email if someone had a question you want to fire off to you. So again, thank you, and I guess I'll see you at 5 o'clock, but we'll move on with the rest of our meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's it's the delegation. We have no priority issues today or correspondence items. Anything for a roundtable before we wrap up? Great stuff in the chat. Yeah, good point, Courtney. Vicky, and then Joanne.
Yeah, kind of depressing news, of course. I just saw like recently how Canada's kind of reframing this whole situation around mental health and affordable housing as well, like how to put it. They think there's an easier way out, which is not a way out at all. It's not even a factor to determine. And I think that before we get anywhere close to that, we should be spearheading a movement where we help everyone we possibly can, take care of our neighbors, take care of everybody, and ensure that we get everybody housed, because I think there's going to be a lot of tents coming up soon too, like we're seeing in Kingston. That worries me. I know you mentioned before, though, Mayor, that as long as they're not on Parks Canada land, it should be okay. That's a gray area, though. Not saying everybody rush up on our land, but before we get there, we got to do something, sort of. So the more we can do, I think, on education pieces and whatever is good. You're starting to sell me on smaller developments. I'm not totally sold on getting rid of a minimum square footage altogether, but I am seeing the incentives towards it and the pros to having it. Other than that, thank you.
Thanks, Vicky. Joanne, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I was in Brockville, and what Vicky was just saying, along the 401, there are tents, like people are living in tents along the 401. And that's pretty disturbing to see that. Ray, like when we first started talking, we had talked about possibly having through the town some dollars set aside to help. Is that like all kibosh now, or like, remember we talked about maybe having some dollars set aside and that the town may put some tax dollars also?
So yeah, I think we had discussions on a purple housing benefit, and the county currently has, I believe it's 60 purple housing benefits that they disperse across the county from Smith Falls. And ideally that is the right environment. They've got the structure in place, they have the methodology, they have everything in place. So I have spoken with colleagues in the urban municipalities across the county about this. And there's an intention to bring it back to the Community Services Committee at County Council for discussion. So it's not dead. I suspect it's nothing that could be done for this year. And of course, we're going into an election year, and it could be a completely different councils across Smith Falls and the county. We don't know. So, but we wanted to at least get the discussion going. And my hope is that there would be at least a placeholder in the county's 2023 budget for discussion for the next council would be the objective. And of course, the Smith Falls has a shared services agreement with the county, so we pay for social services, and so as an example, if there was an agreement that we're going to put a affordable housing benefit in place, then Smith Falls, we would simply pay our share, and the county would manage it. So I would just say stay tuned. I wish I had more news on it, but at least there's still some traction underneath it. Okay. Well, at that, I'll ask for a motion for adjournment. Moved by Courtney, seconded by Vicky. All in favor? Thanks everyone for once again, your outstanding participation today.